The meeting is now reconvened to open session. The board would like to remind the public that this meeting is being audio and video recorded and is also available via live stream. The live stream link can be found on the front page of the RUSD website. Tonight we have Lucas Marquardt from Whitney High School as our student board representative. Welcome, Lucas. Will you please introduce the color guard and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Ladies and gentlemen, please stand for the presentation of the colors by the Rocklin Unified School District's Junior ROTC Color Guard and the Pledge of Allegiance. The commander and U.S. flag bearer for this evening's color guard is Cadet Major Audrey Threlkel. The state flag is carried by Cadet Captain Maverick Wynn. The right guard is Cadet Captain Gavin Lee. The left guard is Cadet Lieutenant Colonel McKenna McVicar. The alternate for tonight is Cadet First Lieutenant Isaiah Brizuela. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, now moving on to our special recognition and presentations portion of the meeting. Chief Dosanjh, will you introduce our family partners in education recognition tonight?
Good evening, President Hupp, trustees, and Superintendent Stock. The Family Partners in Education program is an opportunity for the Rocklin Unified School District to acknowledge and appreciate family engagement and involvement, thereby supporting our students in achieving excellence throughout the school year. Tonight, Parker Whitney Elementary School Principal Olivia Kahn is introducing the Jesse Nibley family for tonight's Family Partners in Education recognition.
I'd like to thank the board for giving Parker Whitney the opportunity to recognize a very special person. Tonight, the Board of Trustees would like to recognize Jesse Nibley, our Parker Whitney PT's president, for her outstanding leadership, dedication, and commitment. Jesse has been an incredible partner to our school, listening closely to the needs of our students and families, and working tirelessly to create programs and opportunities that enrich learning and strengthen our school community. This year, she led the Jogathon, our recent auction night, and with our Jogathon, she exceeded previous year's earnings, providing valuable support for students across all grade levels. She has helped the PTC transition to funding grade-level learning experiences like Touch of Understanding, Wild Things, and Slide Park Transportation. By removing financial barriers, Jesse ensures that every student can participate in these hands-on, meaningful experiences and programs that leave a lasting impact on students while strengthening our school community. Beyond these programs, Jesse has supported scholarships, transportation costs, and initiatives that enhance our campus, including murals, PBIS banners, and a $10,000 match for facilities improvement. She meets monthly with me and approaches every conversation with sincerity. She listens deeply to understand how the PTC can best partner with families and staff. Jesse's leadership helps create a school culture where diverse voices are heard, barriers are reduced, and students and families feel truly supported. Her work is invaluable, and I am deeply grateful for her dedication and service to Parker Whitney.
You pretty much said it all, but I want to give you this thank you on behalf of the board. You are just amazing. The amount of time you spend at Parker Whitney and just, I mean, you really called it. Just, you know the school, you know the needs. You help to make things accessible for students so that they have fun and have a well-rounded experience. You're just really hardworking. You get things done. But you're also really fun to hang out with and make it very welcoming for parents to get involved and be part of all of the good work as well. So just thank you, and Phil and the kids, and just all that you do for our community. You can bring it.
And thank you so much to Jessica's whole crew. We're glad that you could all make it out here to support Mom. All right, and Chief Dosanjh, will you now introduce our employee recognition tonight?
President Hub, Trustees, and Superintendent Stock. Tonight for our employee recognition, Whitney High School Principal Scott Collins will join us to introduce Mary Carter.
Hey, friends. Good evening, members of the Board of Trustees and Superintendent Stock. It is my distinct honor tonight to represent Whitney High School in having the board recognize Mary Carter for her exceptional service to our school district. As a principal, I am often reminded that the true health of a school culture is not found in its facilities or its accolades, but in the dedication of the individuals who work directly with our students every single day. Mary Carter is the embodiment of that dedication. Mary serves as an instructional aide in our moderate to severe special education program. To those outside of the classroom, the title instructional aide may not fully capture the complexity of the work. In the moderate to severe setting, the demands are rigorous, physically, emotionally, and instructionally. It requires a high level of technical proficiency in implementing individualized education programs, a deep understanding of adaptive communication, and an unwavering patience that few possess. Mary has navigated these challenges for years with a level of grace and professionalism that has made her an indispensable pillar of our special education department. What sets Mary apart is her ability to build profound trust with her students and their families. For parents of students with significant needs, the school experience can be quite a source of anxiety. Having a steady, experienced hand like Mary's in the classroom provides those families with the peace of mind that their children are not only safe, but are being challenged to grow. She sees the potential in every student, focusing on what they can achieve rather than the limitations they face. Whether she is assisting with vocational skills, facilitating social transitions, or providing one-on-one behavioral support, Mary operates with the mindset that every Wildcat belongs and every Wildcat can succeed. Furthermore, Mary's impact extends to her colleagues. She serves as a mentor to our newer aides and a reliable partner to our classroom teachers. In a field where burnout can be high, Mary's longevity and consistent positive outlook serve as an anchor for our entire team. She understands the why behind our work, and she shows up every day ready to do the heavy lifting required to make a difference. Mary, on behalf of the Whitney High School administration, the staff, the many families whose lives you have touched, and of course, the wonderful Board of Trustees, thank you for your years of service and your heart for our students. We are honored to celebrate you tonight.
So that is really tough to follow. I will only attempt and try. So have that. Ready? Hang on. Presents. We got multiple presents. So thank you for being connected to the students, to the staff, for helping out, for being there. It's not, for folks in the audience, it's difficult every day not knowing exactly what's going to work and having to jump around, having to put different hats on at different times. So thank you for that. It's amazing. The kids truly do love you. They may not show it every time, but you are loved by all of them. Thank you by the parents and the families. Thank you. Thank you from Whitney. Thank you from all of us. Thank you very much. We're taking a picture. Come on.
Yeah, whole
We're
family.
getting a Whitney.
Big one.
Come on, Whitney. Thank you, guys.
What an honor and a pleasure to honor you tonight, Mary. And I see that maybe we already know that you are allowed to leave now if you would like to. Go celebrate. It is totally appropriate for any of you with your busy lives to exit stage left if you so choose. You're also very welcome to stay for our meeting.
Oh, yeah. Sure.
All right, we do not have any employee organization reports tonight, so we will move down to our comments from our student board representative. Lucas, will you please share your report?
Of course, and thank you. This report is a little shorter than usual due to some technical issues, but we can just get into it. At Whitney High School, Whitney's junior prom is this Saturday, March 21st, at the California Auto Museum. The school is also hosting every 15 minutes on March 26th and the 27th. Finally, election week for next year's Voices, ASB officers, and class officers will take place on the week of April 7th. At Rocklin High School, the recent winter musical, Footloose, was a hit. Another recent success is on March 11th, Rocklin held their first ever beach volleyball match on campus. And beginning tomorrow night, Rocklin will hold their annual Dance One show in their theater. This show runs through Saturday at 7 p.m. with a special Saturday at 2 p.m. Finally, Rocklin High was officially recognized last week as a 2026 California Distinguished School. Short and sweet.
All right, thank you so much, Lucas. And now we'll move on to 7.2, comments from board. Trustees, do you have some comments you would like to share?
So again, just thank you for the updates. Thanks for being there for the picture. Claws up, right? Mm-hmm. All right, and then thank you for that. Everything's looking good.
Yes, thank you, Lucas, for the report. It's always fun to hear what's going on throughout our district. And elections on campus pretty soon. That's always a fun time around the high school. This year, you don't have to worry about it, though, right?
I gotta help run it.
Oh, you got to run it. Okay. Well, I'm sure you're pretty experienced from your campaign last year. So awesome. Thanks for your help on that. I believe I might have mentioned it to the board before, but just because it's coming up tomorrow, I just want to do a public shout out to both Marty Flowers and Bill McDonald for their willingness. I don't know if you were voluntold or if you volunteered, but either way, so thankful. They are our hosts with Sandeep Dosanjh. Tomorrow, we have Rocklin Leadership coming. upcoming. So our community leaders that are going through a year-long program through Rocklin Chamber, these are sometimes school board members, city council members, city staff, or individuals interested in running for office in Rocklin. And so tomorrow we get to spotlight our incredible schools and kick off the entire day at Whitney High and talking about some of our specialty programs and our CTE programs. So thank you in advance. Very appreciative. I always love when I get to see the city highlight and our chamber highlight the great work of Rocklin Unified and that they prioritize that. So thank you both, all three of you, for your participation in advance tomorrow. And then also just wanted to do a shout out as well about the upcoming Every 15 Minutes. I still remember when I experienced Every 15 Minutes as a student, it was such a moving and powerful moment for me in many ways, all for the positive, but definitely was a very moving experience. And so just thank you to the staff that's making space for that program and to the teams that are coming to help it be executed really well. I think it's an incredibly important lesson and something really good for our students to go home and talk about with their families. And so thank you for the good communication on that. And then I know I believe we're looking at an agenda item for an upcoming board study session to talk more about facility work. I've had some community members ask, what we're looking at regarding some of our outdated facilities. How do we plan to address those issues? And so it's an honor to be on that facility committee and be talking through that and look at some of the options we have to try to secure as much state funding as we can. So looking forward to that upcoming board study session to dig even deeper.
Okay, well, we're getting into the busy time of year, which is exciting. Lots of spring sports going and all kinds of end-of-the-year activities. I was able to go to the mega band concert at Whitney High School, and I did note down some of my favorites from the show, just so that I could kind of give a little shout out. The RHS Advanced Band did a piece called Arabesque, and it was so good. I even looked at my daughter who was there playing the flute. I was like, that was so good. She's like, I know. And then Whitney High did a piece by Robert Smith. There were 2 different pieces by Smiths, but different, so I made a little note. And then also they have this award-winning percussion band that combines students from both schools. And so they circled up these metal chairs and did this whole piece and showed off their trophies, and it was great. Showcase night for middle schools. So at Springview, they had this art installation on campus. It was these tape people where they had wrapped up their arms and all of their body and stuck them together and posed them all over the campus. And it was really awesome. And just seeing all the students, I was talking to one of the teachers and she's like, the energy tonight is just electric. I'm like, it really kind of is. Everyone was just really excited. I don't know, just finding their friends and running around and picking what electives they want to sign up for. It was great. And then lastly, so last weekend, Saturday, I got to help out at the Parker Whitney parent auction again, and just, helping out at the bar, cleaning up, putting things, kind of organizing, and also just, getting to kind of hang out. It was so fun. So one of the Parker Whitney teachers, Mrs. Kalinowski, actually also teaches line dancing, and so that was kind of the theme of the event, and she taught us all a couple numbers, and so we had fun and we learned something too. So that's what I've got.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing all that. I don't have anything new to add. Superintendent Stock?
Just a couple pieces. Again, we are very proud, as was mentioned, of Rocklin High School and Granite Oaks both being named California Distinguished Schools by the state of California, and it was not the first time those schools have been named, and that just demonstrates, the excellence that they provide to students. So we're very, very excited about that and the upcoming celebration, and trustees will be bringing them back to the board for recognition in May. Also, just a couple other pieces. This is one of my favorite days in the year, besides the graduations, Lucas, is the employee recognition. So we will be jumping on a school bus. Cabinet colleagues, other colleagues will be coming, and if we show up at your school and we surprise, it may mean a great surprise for you. So our opportunity to recognize certificated classified employees throughout the organization for being our Employee of the Year. So if you see us out on Thursday in a bus, it just might be you. And then also, as I shared last time, we are excited to celebrate the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence and our independence as a nation. And we have an ongoing open essay and art contest for students, and the deadline is April 15th to submit your entries. So we encourage students to do so. If you need something to do during your upcoming spring break, that might be a good thing. And so we're very excited about that as well. And as I say always this time of year, we are open for your enrollment 24 hours a day, 7 days a week through our website, and we are happy to answer questions personally if you need assistance in enrolling.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. All right, we will now look at item 8. 8.1, the consent calendar. All matters listed under the consent calendar are to be considered routine and will be enacted by one motion, followed by a roll call vote. There will be no separate discussions of these items unless the Board of Trustees requests specific items to be removed from the consent calendar for separate discussion and action. Any items removed will be voted upon following the motion to approve the consent calendar. Does any trustees wish to remove an item from the consent calendar for separate discussion and action?
I need to pull item 8.2, please.
Okay, Trustee Price requested to move consent item 8.2 for separate discussion and action. Is there a motion to approve the remainder of the consent agenda items?
So moved.
Okay, first by Trustee Counter,
Second. Oh, go ahead.
Need 1 second.
second by Trustee Price. Georgia, will you please call the roll?
Lucas Marquardt,
Yes.
Rochelle Price,
Yes.
Tiffany Sadoff,
Yes.
Michelle Sutherland,
Yes.
Derek Counter,
Yes.
Julie Hupp.
Yes, motion passes. Trustee Price, would you please speak to item 8.2?
Yes, I just had to pull that item because I was out of the country that day and unable to attend the meeting.
Okay, so is there a motion to approve consent agenda item 8.2?
So moved.
First by Trustee Counter,
Second.
second by Trustee Sutherland. Georgia, will you please call the roll?
Lucas Marquardt,
Yes.
Rochelle Price,
Abstain.
Tiffany Sadoff,
Yes.
Michelle Sutherland,
Yes.
Derek Counter,
Yes.
Julie Hupp.
Yes. Thank you. Motion passes. Now on to item 9, action items. And we now invite, sorry. Yes, that is correct. We now invite Mario DaCosta, Director of Fiscal Services, to present item 9.1, the Maria Montessori Charter Academy petition for renewal and to hold public hearing.
Yes, good evening, President Hupp, trustee members, and Superintendent Stock. I am here. It's my pleasure to introduce the Maria Montessori Charter Academy. They'll have a presentation to go through some of the information. They are here regarding their renewal petition. So per California code, they're required to have their petition renewal through us. And so I'd like to introduce Brent Boothby, the Executive Director of Maria Montessori Charter Academy, as well as the Assistant Director, Adrian Garcia.
Thank you, Mario.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Members of the board, Rocklin Unified staff, it is our honor to be before you this evening, and thank you very much for having us. Every so many years, we get to have the opportunity to come and talk about our school. And this evening, as we get going on this, I'd also like to acknowledge our board, our staff, and our families, and of course, what's most important to me are our students, as we share a little bit about who we are and what we're doing and what we've been doing in particular since our last charter renewal in 2018. We're going to talk tonight a little bit about our program, including a little bit of a studio video montage, because frankly, I think hearing from the kids matters more than hearing from people like us sometimes. We're going to talk a little bit in terms of the number stuff, whether it's demographical data, the charter performance renewal stuff, fiscal, all the number type things. And then we're going to, give it up for a chance for any questions that the board may have. Now, I was thinking the other day that the first time I had the privilege of standing at the lectern, so to speak, the board was actually still over at Rocklin City Council with their board meetings in 2002. I've been doing this a long time. And in talking to Principal Collins and talking about our kids who went through Whitney and how they're doing in college, it's, 2002, they weren't around then. And now they're both gone and in the college side. So as I was thinking about that, frankly, I've talked a lot, and I'm probably going to talk too much tonight. So I'm privileged to also introduce tonight one of our teachers who's jumping through the loops to become an administrator herself and get a clear administrative credential. And this is Adrienne Garcia, who's going to be doing a lot of the talking tonight. And Adrienne, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Good evening. All right, so like Brent said, our students, lovely students at MMCA, put together a little video montage. So we're going to start with that, and then I'll get into my part here. Ooh, that's not the beginning.
We can see it on our screen, but we can't see it on that one yet.
Okay.
My favorite thing about MMCA was participating in the sports. I did flag football, soccer, and basketball.
My favorite part about MMCA is probably math.
My favorite thing is girls volleyball season.
I like the teachers.
My favorite thing this year was girls flag football season.
Probably PE.
It's PE. I've been here for 9 years, and the favorite thing about the school is the staff because they're really nice.
My favorite memory at MMCA was going to Tahoe Treetops in 6th grade because it taught me to build relationships with my classmates.
I like my science jobs. My favorite things about school is my teachers and garden.
I like the sports here.
Reading and book bags. I love the garden at school. I love doing my math jobs.
My favorite memory at MMCA was going to the Science Slide Park field trip in 6th grade. My favorite thing is doing sports with all of my friends.
I like the sports here.
PE. My favorite part about MMCA, probably math, because history, because I'm pretty good at history. Also, I like PE because it's PE, you know what I'm saying?
I love being a watchdog because I get to see my daughter in action at school. I get to see all of the classrooms and how they work, the teachers and how they relate to the kids, and I get to see the kids grow and learn.
Okay. My favorite able to do that, but I can't pause it, so we don't have to watch it again. All right, so that student published, as I mentioned. PE is super awesome at our school, if you can't tell. All right, so I do get the privilege tonight of talking to each of you about the MMCA program. As you may or may not know, MMCA was originally chartered by Twin Rivers back in 2000. They renewed our charter in 2002 and 2007. Rocklin took over our charter in 2008. And our charter with Rocklin has been renewed both in 2013 and 2018, and hopefully 2026. This year, as most years, we have around 300 students. We have 20 highly qualified teachers in our classrooms, and we have about 45 classified staff members that support our school. Who is MMCA? So MMCA, if you're not familiar with our program, we are a Montessori school. However, we do consider ourselves to be a hybrid. We do have to adhere to the California state standards, so we meld that Montessori-ness with the state standards as well. What does that look like when we have to present this hybrid program to our parents and our students? We have multi-age classrooms, so it's not just one grade level in each classroom. We have 2 grade levels in each classroom. I mentioned we had 20 highly qualified teachers. We only have 9 classrooms, so we actually have 2 teachers in each classroom, certificated teachers, not a teacher and an aide. Our students get the benefit of individualized work plans, which means that they are getting what they need. They don't necessarily get, not every student in that classroom is getting the exact same thing. We do a lot of hands-on at MMCA. We like to give our students that experience to get their hands dirty, work with the manipulatives, and then of course each week we also allow them to some time to have some focused reflection, which if you heard one of the students say their favorite part of MMCA was our garden, that is where a lot of our reflection takes place. We do offer differentiated instruction, ability-based ELA and math in all of our classrooms from kindergarten through 8th grade. Within, like for example, Mr. Boothby mentioned that I also teach there in my 6th grade class. We have 34 students. I offer a minimum each year of 3 different math groups, and it's usually more around 5. We have 6 or 7 reading groups, reading levels in our classroom, and we have 5 different like spelling levels. And within each of our classrooms, that's a good representative of how each of the classrooms work. We offer biweekly electronic reports for our parents to keep them updated, and we have recently embraced Aries for our grade book. And so parents actually get that real-time grades up to date for our 6th through 8th grades. A unique policy, a couple of unique policies that we have at MMCA is we do ask our parents to volunteer in our school if they can. We request 40 hours a year, and the families do what they can, and we've been really successful with that model. Last year we logged over 50,000 volunteers. 50,000, good grief. Not even that many hours in a school year. 5,000, I know, right? We're working them overtime. 5,000 hours of volunteer time. And then MMCA does also have a student uniform policy, which you might not have noticed in the video because that was our free dress period. So everybody looked a little different. But this picture here is a little bit better representative of our uniform policy. We do Spirit Fridays, so our student leadership, who's pictured here, designs a new t-shirt each year and encourages our community to purchase that and then wear it on Fridays. Or we just wear navy blue if we don't have a Spirit shirt. But it's always fun. We do a little competition among the classrooms as to who can have the most Spirit in their dress. I mentioned the ELA and the math being ability-based, and of course we are not all business at MMCA. We do get to do the fun stuff too. We do have a great VAPA program. We have one of our teachers that is a fabulous art docent, so there is art brought into each of the classrooms on a monthly to bi-monthly time period. We do weekly musical instruction. We have a fabulous ukulele teacher that teaches ukulele to our students. And each of the classrooms performs a class play throughout the year, and we have been fortunate enough over the last few years to have our character ed program. We have a student-led assembly every month for about 10-15 minutes to present the character ed program. That was implemented a few years ago, and that's been a real big hit. Our 4th through 8th grade has an electives program, so on Friday afternoons, about 2 o'clock, right before we get to leave for the week, they get to go out and have fun choosing whatever elective they've chosen. We rotate them throughout the year. We always offer something down at our park. We're next to Margaret Azevedo. We have outdoor play on our own campus because we really do like to encourage the kids to get outside, get some fresh air. We usually offer something in our garden. We have what we call a little buddies program with our kindergartners get out at 2 and the rest of the school doesn't get out until 3. So they partner up and they do crafts with them or read to them or something like that. Every month or so we offer cooking, and it's just a really, nice program that we do for those 4th through 8th grades. Our younger students, they do get to participate in something like that, but it's more instead of a whole group thing, they do it individually in their classrooms. They call it Fun Fridays. The 7th and 8th grade, they have a couple of unique things that they do at MMCA. They have a practical life rotation, so each Friday they practice, they get to do coding, ASL, they have done rockets previously, and then our Teen CERT program. If you're not familiar with that, that is, I should 100% know what CERT means, but it's basically student emergency personnel. They put on a mock disaster. The head teacher who teaches it has been doing it for many, many years. She's trained actually by the Teen CERT program, so she's officially trained by them. And each year, I highly recommend if you guys ever have time, this year it's on May 1st, to come out and check this out, because we partner with the local law enforcement, emergency personnel. Our head teacher gets to pick the disaster. Our parents come on campus. They destroy the classrooms in whatever manner represents that disaster. Our 4th through 6th grade students get to be the victims, and then our 7th and 8th graders get to be the rescuers, with our 8th graders leading the role as the, can't think of the name of it. Thank you, there it is, emergency response trainees. So yeah, that's a really awesome program that our 7th and 8th graders get to do. And speaking of inviting you out, I've mentioned the garden. I've mentioned our mock disaster, which this year is on May 1st, Friday, May 1st. So we have this slide in here that shows how do you find out more about MMCA. You can always go to the website. You can always go to our Facebook page. If you really wanted to, you could be put on our email distribution list. But what we really would love all of you to do and encourage you to do is come and take a look at our school. We welcome visitors any day of the week, any time of the day. We're not particular. You could show up unannounced if you wanted to. We would welcome that too. But I do highly encourage all of you to come and visit. Come and say hi. We'd appreciate that. And now for all the business stuff, I'm going to hand it back to Brent.
Great job, Adrian. So just briefly going over our demographics, because I recognize the board's time is short, so I will not necessarily read word for word, but just generally speaking, our kids are comprised of what you'd expect. And we have kids in our extremes right now from Colfax in the east, Yuba City north. I don't think I have Elk Grove anymore, but we have Sac City south and Natomas west. Now that being said, is it fair to say that 80% of our kids come within a 5-mile radius of our location? Sure. And is it fair to say that closer to 2/3 of them are Rocklin Unified or Western Placer based? Sure. But we definitely have people coming from all over the place. Continuing on that demographics, we are a Title I identified school. Our approximate racial and ethnic, by percentages and by student groups are fairly representative of most schools that you'd find within Placer County, and they're listed there. And our EL percentage right now is around 4, and our current special education percentage is around 12. In particular on special ed, really quick, we are a voting member of the Placer County SELPA and have been for the last, now almost 12 years. And that means we're a member of the SELPA in essentially the same ways as, say, Rocklin Unified is as well. Although we are officially amongst the group of the so-called quote-unquote smalls, so we're treated a little bit differently than the larger districts, and we appreciate that because we have the support, of other schools in our size and dealing with similar type issues there. The bigger picture makes this a little bit different than, say, the Rocklin Academy Gateway presentation you saw a few months ago, in that we are, as a part of the SELPA, we have to agree to follow all of the policies and procedures, rules, and all of the other rigmarole as just as Rocklin Unified does. It means that we also get great support from our friends in the SELPA, including regular meetings with our program specialists. They have full access to all of our data. If perhaps we make a mistake, they're going to let us know, and we're going to get on it and make it fixed. So it's what I think has been a really good relationship. And as we start getting into transitioning to some of the performative aspects of our program, a couple of things in SPED in particular, all schools are going through a type of CDE-based detailed review. On the small school level, it's called Cycle A, B, and C, and we happen to be a part of Cycle B, and we were one of the few that got through with no follow-up action required, which in SPED world, that's awesome. As you guys are probably aware as well, Every year, the state also does things called an annual determination letter. And they go through each of the different things that you could possibly get right, or maybe some of the things you get wrong and related to it, and have you do follow-up. And I wanted the board to be aware that our action letters, so to speak, for the past several years, including the most recent, have been always clear and with no action taken. Now, as we get into that straight accountability stuff, I don't feel like reading through all of this, so I'm going to do the summary version. 2024, we're all blue or green in everything that matters. 2025, with the exception of chronic absenteeism, we are all blue and green in everything that matters. One of the final metrics when you're evaluating as far as how a charter school is doing, at least in the new state dichotomy with charter renewal, is subgroup performance. And in particular, subgroup performance versus the state averages. I'm not going to go through each of them line by line, but generally speaking, our Hispanic student subgroup, as far as a qualifying subgroup for the last 2 years prior to our renewal, significantly outperformed state averages. And for the 1 year where our students with disabilities qualified as a subgroup, they also likewise significantly outperformed state averages. The rough average of all of those in particular is about 80 to 90 points higher than said state averages. This one's a little bit different, so I'm going to take a moment on this one. We are part of the California Charter Schools Association, and they provide all kinds of data metrics to their members. Now, the two I'm going to highlight on this one in particular, and the slide is a comparison of our school versus, I used Placer County because I think that's the most representative of who our sample size is. So when I'm saying compared to versus Placer County, it's literally every public school in the county, including us, aggregated in that data. When you see the top line as far as state rank, I don't know if you can remember back to the old API days, but that's essentially what that is the decile ranking. So when you see us there as a 9 out of 10, or Placer County, which is, as we all know, has overall really good schools, is an 8 out of 10, those are really good numbers. The one that matters to me the most, and I'm going to skip to the bottom, is the CCSA Similar Students Rank. What the Similar Students Rank does is it takes your demographics as a school and all those publicly available, well, some I guess aren't quite publicly available, but demographic data about your students, whether it's, are they in special education, are they an EL student, what is their ethnicity, what is their parent income levels via the free reduced lunch program, perhaps parent education levels, et cetera, et cetera. And it does essentially a predictive number based on your demographics on what your school students should be, and that predictive number would be a 5. So if you're below that predictive number, it means you've probably got some issues and you're not performing as well as, at least on paper, your demographics should be. And if you're over that number, then in particularly significantly over that number, then you're probably producing a really good product for your kids. When you see that number then as far as our predicted number, or I'm sorry, our actual number on that SSR ranking being a 9, which happens to be the highest number in Placer County of any of the charter schools, and infers that we are very much outperforming our demographics, that's the thing that's I am most proud of, and it's a tremendous reflection of our staff and the incredible job that they do. Bringing it back to public school land versus charter school stuff, the other way I could have just skipped all of those slides and just summarized is, hey guys, we're a California Distinguished School too. And in both of the cycles post-COVID, we've been privileged to receive said designation. And I believe we're the only elementary-based school in the county that's received it in both cycles post-COVID. Fiscal stuff. Ultimately, we are a 501c3, and we operate a number of programs. The short version on this, without going through line by line, is we control all of our own stuff. We do our own before-after care, we do our own hot lunch, et cetera, et cetera. Now, within that organization, since we became independent from Twin Ridges School District, you almost had me in the Twin Rivers one. On the Twin Ridges School District, back in 2008, we've had 100% clean audits for the prior 18 years. I can recall a year or two where perhaps Mario maybe helped us out a little bit via phone during COVID, and I really appreciated that then. He worked for the auditing firm that we were using at the time and actually still use now. Just a couple of base numbers for us here. Our net assets are around $2.4 million. Our budget is based off of, as admittedly a smaller school, revenues and expenditures of around $4.25 million this year. Now, obviously, what we're asking of you tonight is to think about and come out and visit our school if you can in the next couple months, but it's really more about the ask for the May meeting, where we're going to respectfully ask for our charter to be renewed. Now, quick context on said charter. You know, it was this variation of the charter, at least, has been in play again since 2008. And it's fair to say that Rocklin Unified staff at the time and Rocklin Unified legal counsel at the time very much went through it, as did our legal counsel, with fine-tooth combs on all kinds of stuff. And while there's been law update changes, particularly since this last period of 2018 to 26, the core elements of the charter are unchanged. And if you, other than say the accountability updates and the legal updates, depending on which AI you want to use, roughly speaking, it's a 94% similarity. So it's basically the same document minus the legal changes that this group approved in 2018. And with that, you want to wrap it up?
Yeah, in conclusion, this is it, the last 30 seconds. All right, so MMCA, we will beat it into you guys. We are a California Distinguished School. We are Maria Montessori, Montessori identified, Title I. As far as we know, based on that data, we are the only school in the state with all of those distinctions. We have been fiscally clean since 2008 when Rocklin started with our charter, and the numbers kind of speak for themselves. We have had over 300 students on our wait list last year, but that number is pretty close to what it has been for the last few years post-COVID. All right, so that's it, and we are happy to take any questions you guys may have.
Wow, thank you so much, both
Thank
of you. It was a great presentation. Appreciated the together that you did there. So trustees, are there any comments or questions?
Just appreciate all the information. Look forward to maybe stopping by and visiting. I would enjoy that. Just a question for Superintendent Stock. How long of a renewal term are they eligible for?
This is a question that Maria Montessori is exploring. So they have requested a 7-year renewal, but they also have acknowledged that the California Department of Education, which keeps the statistics and data on the schools that are eligible for a 7-year, normally a renewal time period is 5 years. And if you are designated, I think, high performing, I think that may be the category, then you can be eligible for up to 7 years. And so Maria Montessori has informed the district that they acknowledge that CDE does not have them listed in the eligible category for 7 years, but that they're working with CDE they believe that CDE has miscalculated the data and that they are eligible for a 7. So they're working with CDE to try to get them to change that. And we've indicated to Maria Montessori that if we would be happy to consider that 7-year term when CD has updated their data for us. So they right now are eligible for 5, though they're asking for 7, and we've indicated if they clear that up, we'd be happy to do so.
Thank you. Do you anticipate that we'll have that information by May?
They're shaking their head, yes, and they're working directly with the department head. But I think the other piece is whether they are eligible for at least a minimum of 5-year renewal. We would, and that's consistent with the renewals in the past. So we anticipate that we'll be asking the board to take action on either a 7 or 5-year renewal.
Great, thank you.
I guess question for either, when the renewal, when it works through, is it like fall of 26? And then that carries, so it would be like through, if I do my math right, spring of 31? Is that how is it school year or is it calendar year? I guess that'll help.
Fiscal year, July 1, June 30.
Okay, perfect.
Just want to say thank you for the presentation. We have great options for families here in Rocklin, and I am a big fan of families having options. I think it's really important. Not every child is the same. Their needs aren't the same. And so I appreciate you coming tonight and sharing with us what the last few years have looked like. And again, I'm a big fan of supporting some of the great charters we have in our area. I look forward to hopefully being able to come by and say hi, a little more personable, but I appreciate you coming tonight. And I just wanted to share at a glance, having been able to look through this a little bit, I always appreciate quality programs for our parents and our students to choose from. So thank you very much for what you offer to the community of Rocklin.
Yes, thank you. I look forward to taking you up on that invitation, and thank you for sharing the actual words from the students and all of their varied interests. You clearly have a lot to offer them, so thank you so much.
It really was a great presentation. Thank you. All right, I will now open a public hearing on this matter. Are there any comments? Okay, I will close the public hearing. Thank you both again very much. Have a wonderful evening. And now we'll move on to 9.2. Mario, please continue with the second interim report and budget revisions.
Absolutely. Thank you again, President Hump. Good to see you all again. Trustees and Superintendent Stock, give me 1 second while I get this set up. So as you mentioned, we are here today to go over the second interim budget report as required by the California Department of Education. So this is the second interim cycle of the 2 interims that we are required to do by Ed Code. Also want to point out or highlight that this is a snapshot as of January 31st for our budget. It's important to emphasize that simply because the budget will never be the same from day to day. There have already been changes from when this was prepared. So just want to highlight that, and that this does reflect recent decisions at both the state and federal levels as well as local levels with decisions made. And we'll dive into some of that further on in the PowerPoint. So first one, I wanted to present this to you. You guys are accustomed to seeing this at this point in time. So just a quick snapshot of the entire budget cycle as it sits. We are currently in that second interim cycle where we review it as that January 31st snapshot. And then this also kind of highlights, it's nice to see some of the upcoming things that you'll be seeing when it comes to the budget. We have that preliminary LCAP budget that we'll be working on in the next few months, as well as working on the adopted budget. In the meantime, the other thing we'll see is by May 14th, the governor is required to provide a May revise for the California state budget, and that's where a lot of our funding determinations are going to be made. And so I'll also be attending Deputy Superintendent Stahlhuber and I will be attending a seminar afterwards on May 21st to go through all of the details of those budget changes. So now we'll start diving into some of the numbers. So first thing is the revenues. We'll look at the revenues, and this is just a comparison from first interim to second interim. So you can see the fluctuations that we have with our major revenue sources. And I'll just kind of dive into each of the variances really quick, give you some of the highlights there so you can see what caused those variances. So first one is the LCFF funding. That is the local control funding formula funds that we receive from the state as well as local funding. And that is the major determining funding source for all school districts in the state of California. You can see it was a minor adjustment of around $80,000. The majority of that was because our unduplicated percentage ticked up slightly from first to second interim. It was a 0.1%, so it was a very minor adjustment. The other thing was we got a little extra TK funding just based on the TK 88 that came through. Very minor adjustments, but wanted to highlight those. The next thing is the federal revenue. So you can see the federal revenues did drop by about $258,000. The big factor that caused that was just the SELPA funding model. And when they did the revised numbers for second interim, we did lose some of that federal funding. That was about $286,000. So we did recoup some on some of the other funded grants, but for the majority, that is the cause of the variance. Next, we'll look at the other state revenues. You can see a pretty substantial increase there, the $1.5 million. And the reason for that being is some of the one-time funds finally got distributed or increased our allocation. The big one was the student support and demonstration block grant. I refer to it as the SPUD bug. That's kind of a colloquial term. That increased by about $800,000. And then the other one was the Learning Recovery Emergency Block Grant. Another one-time funding source increased by $246,000. We also saw the Expanded Learning Opportunities Grant was a $111,000 increase. And then some SPED revenues for the state portion were increased by $141,000. So a bunch of small ones that kind of make up that total, the big one being that SPUD bug, as well as that Learning Recovery Emergency Block Grant one-time funding sources. Finally, we look at other local revenue. That's where we saw our most substantial increase, that $2.3 million. And a lot of that was associated with the buses and the clean air projects that we had going on. So we hadn't recognized those revenues until some of the confirmations came through. But that was $1.2 million of that increase in funding, was those alone. A couple other big ones that we also saw was our Medi-Cal. So we had an additional $368,000 of Medi-Cal funding. We only recognize that once it's submitted because we never know what that number is going to be, so we don't want to over or under project it. It's also really restricted, so it can only be used on those medical supplies anyway. And then finally, the other thing we did have is because of the strong economy, We have had an additional $500,000, or we're projecting an additional $500,000 in interest income. We already had a pretty aggressive recognition number. That being said, as you well know, the market is performing better than we could have anticipated, and so we are recognizing that we will probably come in with about an additional $500,000 of interest income. So something that we wanted to recognize there. The next slide. This is just a breakdown showing those revenues in a pie chart so you can kind of see. As it is with most school districts in the state of California, the majority of our funding does come from that LCFF revenue, so that 71% breakdown. Pretty common with school districts. Sometimes you'll see some with additional federal revenues or state revenues depending on grants, as well as unduplicated pupil percentage counts. But typically you're going to see that LCFF funding be the largest, which is, we are consistent with that expectation. So next we'll dive into the expenditures and we'll start looking at these. I'm going to do the same thing, just kind of highlight some of the big variances from each of the funding sources. And so first thing we'll start off with is the certificated salaries, classified salaries, and benefits. I'm going to kind of talk about all of them as one combined unit, with the big reason for their increases being the settlements. So as you know, between first interim and second interim, we settled with all of our bargaining units. And so the updated expenses here reflect those increases. And so later on, we'll talk about what our commitments look like. You'll see our commitments came down slightly in response to that. But this shows what our expected increase of all of the settlements is going to be. There is a slight decrease from the final expected for the current year simply because of vacancy savings. So there was a little bit of other variance fluctuations. But for the most part, staffing held pretty consistent from first interim to second interim. So a lot of this is just the reflected settlement increase amount. Next thing we'll dive into books and supplies. Pretty minor adjustments there, some increases and decreases across funding resources. The biggest thing I wanted to highlight was we have started to recognize funds that we are not going to spend this year and recognize that they will be carrying over into the subsequent year. So that's the cause for that decrease right there. Mostly just those school site funds that we're going to start projecting to be carried over. Next thing is the service and operating expenses. So you can look at that, a larger variance at $500,000. A lot of that is due to utility costs. So based on historical activity in the state, and I know that Deputy Stahlheber showed at the first interim, we had seen a lot of rate increase trends. So in looking at what we've done from first to second interim, we've actually seen some pretty consistent rates. The other thing we've identified is that we've done a lot of work, as you guys are well aware, at some of our air conditioning, revamping, some of the green lighting projects that we've been doing at the high schools, as well as the charging the electric buses. All of that has done some work to save on some of our utility costs. So we've shown we're projecting a decrease of $400,000 in our utility expenses from first to second interim. So that's a large cause of it. Another one is supplemental costs. As I said, we're starting to project some of those carryover funds. So some of our supplemental funding has come down slightly. That all being offset, we do have an increase in those non-public agency contracts for our special ed funding. That was about a $300,000 increase. Those are the largest factors that are really going into those contract service cost changes. The next thing is capital outlay. So you can see capital outlay came down by $1.9 million. And really there's two factors there to think about. So the first one I'll talk about is the $3 million decrease associated with the one-time facilities. And so what we've done is we've recognized that, hey, we aren't going to finish the one-time facilities that the board approved in this current fiscal year. And so we've projected some of those expenses carrying over into the subsequent year. And so we wanted to reflect that on that capital outlay line so we wouldn't see it all drop out at the end of the year when we do our unaudited actuals. What I'll say is that you'll see when we get to the commitments, you'll see that $3 million show up there as our committed balance that we will be spending those in the subsequent year. Once again, we want to get that timing correct as we're finishing up second interim, heading into unaudited actuals. The offset is there was that $1.2 million increase. We talked about the bus grants getting approved. So we recognize the associated expense that we will have with those bus grants. So that $3 million offset by that $1.2 million is basically the majority of the change with some other small fluctuations tied in there as well. Oh, and sorry, transfers out and transfers of indirect, pretty minor adjustments there. Those are really just recognizing the transfers between resources. And so those will always fluctuate from year to year. Nothing specific in there that was necessarily large, but those are just those transfers. So breakdown really quick. Always love to show this slide, just a breakdown of where our expenditures are, what we primarily focus on. And so you can see this year right now at second interim, it shows that 79% of it is being spent on salaries and benefits, which is the big highlight we like to point out. However, when we back out those one-time funds, specifically the one-time facilities, as well as some other one-time projects we have going on, you can see we come in at that 85.46%, much more consistent with what we typically do, and pretty consistent with the state of California. Most districts will fall somewhere between 80 to 90% of their spending comes into that salary range. So when we're making decisions, it's just very important to be mindful of just how much of our salaries is included in the salary and benefit costs, so any decisions we make, the impact it has there. So general fund summary. So now we'll just look at the general fund balance as a whole, as well as just the summative revenue and expenses report. And so the important one I want to highlight is that first bolded line, that ending fund balance. And so you can see from first to second interim, we are showing an increase in our ending fund balance. A lot of that has to do with those restricted one-time revenues coming in. So we're seeing those come in, driving up the fund balance. And you can actually see that if you look at that restricted line, you can also see that we increased by $1.1 million there. Another thing is the committed funds. It did increase slightly. We'll go into further detail on the next slide about what's in those committed funds, and we can dive in there. And then you can see the unrestricted is 9%, but the final number that you really want to look at is our unassigned ending fund balance is still at that 6% threshold. So not a whole lot of change from first to second interim. You can see that 0.07. Like I said, we do have the settlement numbers that drove up the expenses, but we did have some of those one-time fundings that kind of compensated to leave that percentage pretty consistent. Next slide. This is what I was talking about, those committed fund balances, or the components of fund balances. Specifically want to focus on the commitments. I just wanted to show a comparison of some of the commitments from first to second interim and kind of highlight those balances in there. So the first one you'll see that has a big change is the site discretionary, the donations. And like I said, that's just us starting to recognize that carryover balance. So we continue to commit those because we are giving those back to the school sites every single year. And so I wanted to point that out, that we've started to recognize that carryover, so we wanted to put it there on that line. The next one I wanted to highlight was the one-to-one student device refresh. So those are our one-to-one Chromebooks. As the board has been informed previously, we are looking at refreshing those one-to-one devices. We did our first purchase of Chromebooks. That was approximately $550,000 this year. We've actually done, since second interim, we've done a second purchase as well, trying to ramp that up. But as of when, like I said, it's a snapshot in time. So as of January 31st, this is what we had knowledge of. And so we showed that first $550,000 drawdown on those Chromebook purchases.
Can I ask you a question about that one? What is the age group of students that are seeing those being replaced?
Yes, so this is reflected in our elementary schools.
Okay.
We do the carts and Chromebooks, and we do those every 5 to 7 years, depending on the how they're lasting. We have built in another ongoing budget, the 7-12 refresh. So we actually buy every seventh grader a new Chromebook lasts through their senior year, and that's in our ongoing general fund budget.
Thank you.
And then, so then the next one I wanted to look at and highlight is that stabilization fund. So that is the board-approved stabilization fund that occurred last fiscal year, where we stated that we would commit that additional 3% to make sure that we had flexibility should there be inconsistency with the state budget. So that is still there and included in that committed funds. And I want to highlight, even though we don't go into this level of detail in the multi-years, I did want to highlight before we get there that stabilization still is funded for all 3 fiscal years that we'll be presenting. Next one is that one-time district safety funds. And facility funds, like I said, we know we're not going to get them all done this year just because of the amount of workload, as well as some of the concerns we have with DSA and their approval pathway right now is slightly behind. Put it nicely and say slightly behind. So I just want to highlight that we expect to see some of that come over. So even though we reduced the expenses by $3 million in that capital outlay, we did put it back in the commitment, showing we are still committed to completing those projects in the future years. And we want the money associated with that to be shown here. And then finally, the settlement reserve. So that $1.8 million, what that was at the time at first interim, we had already settled with the other bargaining units for 2%. And so what we had said was, hey, we are going to set aside 2% for the settlement with the RTPA, as well as some of the admin that hadn't settled yet, and we put it as a commitment. So now that we've settled, we're showing the expenses in our expenses. We need to remove it to here, otherwise it would be double representing those expenses. So, and then there's just some minor, actually there's very little fluctuation with the MAW and the charter replacement. Those Typically, we only really reflect at the end of the year. Multi-year projection. So this is the fun one that shows the 3 fiscal years that we have out there. And so as I said, what I really want to emphasize before we get into this is that we have put into the assumptions with the settlement amounts so we can see what the full impact on the expenses for the settlements amount is. But there is going to be additional revenues that the state proposed. We didn't include them because the numbers are still rough and we don't know what the final amounts are going to be. So we would never propose something or put something into our budget that we can't verify is accurate. That being said, we've done some projection modeling. So one of them is going to be a true-up with previous sped revenues. I don't have the dollar amount off the top of my head, but I know that it was somewhere in the 6-figure range. So that's going to be an increase of revenues that we're going to see every single year going forward. As part of, and what that is it's the reflecting of old COLA that hadn't been provided to the sped revenues getting caught up. So there's that one. And then the other one that we don't have is very similar to the spud bug. We have another one-time discretionary grant that they are going to provide to us. We don't know what the final dollar amount is of that, as I said, but we have projected it will be about $5.7 million of one-time funding that we'll receive as well. So those are 2 of the biggest ones that we have. There's other plans that the state has in place, but like I said, we can't put them in our budget models until we have a better understanding of what those numbers are truly going to be. So as you can see, you can come through this. You can see that the budget does get tighter, but the important thing I want to note is we do still, like I said, have that 3% commitment that the board has set aside in the policy, as well as having the 3% required reserve for economic uncertainty. So we are still meeting our funding requirements, our fund balance requirements, and we're just spending down kind of in line with some of what the expectations were. And so next thing, so we are going to say that this is a positive certification, that the district does have the funds to meet the requirements for the current fiscal year as well as the 2 subsequent fiscal years. And so we wanted to point that out. And then next step, so we want the, like I said, positive certification. We're looking forward to that May revised, and then we'll attend that virtual workshop on May 21st. And so with that, I would like to recommend that the board take action on the second interim report.
Thank you so much,
Yeah, any
Mario.
questions?
Yes, trustees, questions and comments?
I have a couple. First, thank you, Mario, and thank you for presenting this evening. Thank you to Jennifer and her work as well. But appreciate you going through this. I really appreciate how you guys have packaged this together and how you presented it. I think it was very clear. It shows the breakdown of where our funds are going. I know I was able to ask a few questions ahead of time, but I thought some of them might be good to just kind of reiterate in case any parents are listening in and might have similar. If we go to slide 8, there's just a few phrases that are used there. I know you used one a few times and described it, but just to highlight for people as they're looking at it, both stabilization funds and settlement reserves. I think those are phrases that would be good to clarify maybe for a parent listening or even a teacher listening in. Could you give a little more clarification on what stabilization funds are?
Yeah, absolutely. So in concert last fiscal year, I believe it was at the June board meeting, either May or June board meeting, I can't recall off the top of my head. One of those 2, the district made it a priority that we had additional funds committed should there be some inconsistency with the state budget. And so part of it, it's a common practice that other districts throughout the state do, but what we elected to do, or what the board elected to do, I should say, is set aside an additional 3% of our general fund expenditures as this committed stabilization funds.
Mm-hmm.
So that was, per board policy, per that directive, we've continued to do so, and so you'll see that going forward in that line, and it'll fluctuate every single budget cycle that we have, because like I said, it's 3% of expenditures. So as expenditures change, that number will change to reflect.
Great. And then just to clarify for this chart, first interim to second interim, that's not an additional $5 million. It's that first interim we showed 5.8. That's carried through because it hasn't been spent, because we actually have that in the reserve in case of economic uncertainty. And then the second interim is just showing a recalculation of that, not in addition to that.
Correct, yes. It is the same dollar amount. We are not continuously adding $5 million every time.
Perfect. I
would
just wanted to
love it.
clarify for anybody looking in. And then also the settlement reserve. I know you talked about that a little bit. The word settlement is used for a lot of different things. Sometimes people hear settlement and they think like a court settlement, or you were forced, or you agreed to do a settlement, advance of court. This has nothing to do really with court litigation. Could you clarify what the settlement reserve there is?
Yeah, absolutely. You're totally correct. So it has nothing to do with this, with a settlement like that. It is the bargaining unit settlements. So as I said, we had budgeted 2% for settling the bargaining unit agreements, the tentative agreements with RTPA as well as the administrators, as there had been no settlement made for them. So that was the 2%. It has nothing. That's the settlement that we are referring to is a negotiation settlement with the bargaining unit.
So money that the board had set aside at first interim to be used to compensate increases for our staff.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Perfect. And then just a note, and I know you're not going to be surprised, slide 9, you know, these numbers in red, this is showing a substantial deficit, a structural deficit, much larger than what I've seen in some of our previous reports. I know there's some reasoning for that, and you did a great job of mentioning many of those factors, and I appreciate the bullet at the bottom that we can't include in our second interim potential proposal budget dollars that we yet haven't heard from the legislature. It is very interesting that we have to create our second interim, yet we don't really have the final budget to be able to work off of. And so I was, of course, very concerned when I saw structural deficits that high. However, there are other expected revenues that should bring those numbers down. But I still think it's important for us, if I ever see a structural deficit, that we comment on it. School districts are funded a little differently, and oftentimes they are dependent upon one-time dollars from the state, and so we're able to use those, and that helps us for a year, 2 years, or 3 years. But one-time dollars are limited dollars, and if we continue to rely on those, then we're going to continue to have a structural deficit. And so I just feel like it's important for us as a board to always look at that and see what we can do to continue to bring our structural deficit down, because essentially that means we are planning to spend more money than we are bringing in. And I'm thankful that we are in a healthy situation. We try not to keep too many dollars sitting somewhere because we want them put to good use right now. But we also need to make sure that we can pay our bills for at least 3 years. So I appreciate that although we are presenting a positive report, which means we can pay our bills for 3 years, I want us to continually be aware of these structural deficits, and we do what we can to bring those down.
I agree. I wanted to thank you for your detailed explanation. That was a similar thing that I had brought up in kind of my pre-discussion of just wanting to know about those numbers. And, you know, I think, while not good to see at this moment, understandably so, you wouldn't want to put projection numbers in there just to make it look better when it's not, you know, actually approved and moving forward. But I really did appreciate the line by line and even just some examples of what goes into every category and how that's impacting on the positive or the negative over the 2 time periods. So just thank you a lot for that.
Any other comments or questions?
I will just say thank you for the 85-15 percentage. As many times as you can do that in advance, just from an outside perspective, for those of you guys who don't know, schools are a service organization. 85% of our money goes to teachers and people and all the stuff across it. So we don't make a product that we can sell. We just educate kids for the betterment of society. So thank you for that. As much as we can get closer to that 80, I would love it, but I know it's all in the numbers. So.
All right, thank you again. Is there a motion to approve the second interim report and budget revision?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, first by Trustee Price, second by Trustee Sadoff. Georgia, will you please call the roll?
Lucas Marquardt,
Yes.
Rochelle Price,
Yes.
Tiffany Sadoff,
Yes.
Michelle Sutherland,
Yes.
Derek Counter,
Yes.
Julie Hupp.
Yes, motion passes. Thank you so much. Now, item 9.3, Hannah Anderson, Director of Innovation, School Programs and Accountability, will present Board Policy and Administrative Regulation, new BPAR 1445, response to immigration enforcement, and remove BPAR 5145.13.
Good evening, President Hupp, trustees, Superintendent Stock. Board Policy and Administrative Regulation 1445, Response to Immigration Enforcement, establishes the district's procedures for responding to immigration enforcement activities. Education Code 234.7 includes new legal requirements related to how school districts must respond to immigration enforcement on school campuses. Districts are required to submit to the California Department of Education these updated policies. This was an information item at the March 4th board meeting where trustees requested revisions and additional information regarding changes to the policy and regulation. These changes have been incorporated into the policy and regulation, and tonight, staff recommend trustees take action on board policy and administrative regulation, the new ones, BPAR 1445, Response to Immigration Enforcement, and remove BPAR 5145.13.
Okay, trustees, do you have questions or comments on either of these policies or regulations?
You know, I know we were able to have some extensive conversation in our previous board meeting, and I just know sometimes those listening in maybe didn't, they may not enjoy every single meeting. And so for those that maybe missed the last, could we just clarify why this policy is coming before the board and what happened at a state level that's requiring us to take action on this?
Absolutely. In the fall, Education Code 234.7 was amended. That required districts to update board policy to clarify limits on the sharing of information and documents by specifying that student, family, and staff records may not be disclosed to immigration enforcement absent a valid judicial warrant, subpoena, or court order. This law also defined access to student and school sites by stating immigration enforcement officers may not enter non-public areas of campus without proper judicial authorization. And this Ed Code was amended to ensure transparency in establishing procedures for routing all such requests through the superintendent or designee and providing timely notification to the governing board and as appropriate the public.
Thank you. So basically, for those listening in, state legislature took action and is requiring school boards to comply by having a policy that has several items included in it. I thank you for your sensitivity. We were able to spend some time last board meeting to really look at what is required and what was just guidance or suggestion. I appreciate the sensitivity to really keep this focused on what is required of our school district. And then also the sensitivity that we were able to discuss last time, but I just want to bring it forward today again, that this is not anti-law enforcement. This is simply a policy that the state is requiring school boards to enact to show that they understand a law that was created by the state legislature. And so again, I just want to show my public support for our law enforcement, both local, statewide, and federal. I think, we were talking last time if we've had any experiences here in our community that we've been notified of, and the answer was zero. And so I just want to make that clear why this policy is coming before the board, and thank you for the extra time and sensitivity to really refine it and amend it to make sure it stays true to the requirements of the law and only that.
Any other comments or questions?
Just thank you for everything that you have done. It's been just so heavy on these policies and the administrative regulations and just navigating kind of, our input as we look at the language and the clarity, and also kind of just navigating the legal requirements and Ed Code and combining everything. I think it looks like, it reflects what's required and also what the preferences were. I was happy to see that we were able to still include the language to inform parents if any incident were to happen on a campus. I just appreciate what you've done here.
All right, is there a motion to approve Board Policy and Administrative Regulation new BPAR 1445, Response to Immigration Enforcement, and to remove BPAR 5145.13?
So moved.
First by Trustee Sutherland.
Second.
Second by Trustee Counter. Georgia, will you please call the roll?
Lucas Marquardt,
Yes.
Rochelle Price,
Yes.
Tiffany Sadoff,
Yes.
Michelle Sutherland,
Yes.
Derek Counter,
Yes.
Julie Hupp.
Yes, thank you. Motion passes. Thank you, Hannah. Okay, we will now move on to 9.4. Superintendent Stock, please continue with revisions to Board Bylaw 9250, remuneration, reimbursement, and other benefits.
Trustees, the state legislature and then the governor signed into law AB 1390. And this changes the monthly compensation rates that school, district, and county board of education members are eligible for. This is the first update to this since 1984, and the long overdue, and which is why it was passed and signed into law. Then the relevant bylaw that's associated with this item has not been updated by this board since 2003, again, in 23 years. And so what's before you tonight is a bylaw that reflects the changes that AB 1390 put in place for related to trustee remuneration, reimbursement, and compensation.
Okay, thank you so much. Board, are there any comments or questions?
I did have a question, and I know that this is all language that comes from the Ed Code, so maybe just a little bit of clarification. But there is a point in the kind of top section of this document to say, a second paragraph, on an annual basis, the board may increase the compensation of board members beyond the limit delineated in Ed Code in an amount not to exceed 5% based on the present monthly rate of compensation. Any increase made pursuant to this section shall be effective upon approval by the board. Just kind of questioning whether we would want to include that language, that the board would want to ever approve an amount that exceeds what the Ed Code sets forth. And then my second point, in the second section for reimbursement of expenses, again, I know this is just the standard language that came through, but it does say actual administrative costs related to the leave of absence of the board member for up to 20 days annually for performing services for the district. 20 days to me annually seems high, and I know that that's not necessarily something that board trustees would do, but if it's going to be in our board policy, I would like to just maybe entertain something more like 4 or 5 days, just thinking about conferences or education or things that might be relevant, but I'm not sure that 20 days needs to be on the books.
I agree. I think that's a great thing for us to discuss. We have 2 days of CSBA. Superintendent Stock, what other days do you see, or what's a number that you feel like would be appropriate?
I think beyond the annual conference, there are sometimes legislative action days that a school board may engage in, because as we've talked about, one of the roles of a trustee is to engage in the public policy forum, and sometimes there's needs to do advocacy in relation to public policy, and CSBA annually sponsors days for that locally in Sacramento, 1 or 2 days a year, and then they also do some federal outreach, which can be up to about 3 days a year. So if you look at those types of activities, that puts you in really that around 5-6 days potentially a year for those, and then there could be other activities the board deems that they would want to have them engage in. But 5 to 6 days a year would cover some legislative advocacy and the annual conference and education opportunity.
Okay, thank you. I'll go back to your previous point, Michelle. I feel like, we have a large district which requires a lot of engagement and management and oversight, and even a small stipend doesn't align to the large and meaningful impact that each board member makes on our school and our community. And I feel like the max, the Ed Code, the Evergreen Way, the update to all of this is appropriate. I agree with you. Could we, Superintendent Stock, could we just take out that line about exceeding the cap?
Actually, that line is an education code, and it's designed to be, and it could be removed because the education code would still function. It was designed to say the board said our stipend is going to be $5, and you wanted to increase it. Then you could only do so
up to 5%
up to
increment.
5% increase at a time.
Oh, so it's meant to be a cap. It's not
meant to be a cap
okay.
on increases a board could approve. You could never exceed the education code cap
Yeah.
on the maximum in AB 1390.
I actually wondered the same thing. It caught my eye, and then when I looked up, it's actually listed in the Cal Ed code as essentially you can only do this if. I mean, I have no interest in doing that, so I don't see a concern, but I also think it could get a little tricky if we're, picking apart pieces of the ed code or not. And so, I'm comfortable following what the language of the ed code is. We do that in many other areas with all of our board policies. I could really go either way on that one. I don't have any interest in doing that as far as requesting a 5% above and beyond. But I did see when I asked about it and looked into it more that that's just the language from the ed code. So I could go either way, whatever the board majority feels on that one. And then the other one, the 20 days, I was kind of mulling that over too and was wondering, why does Cal Ed code say 20 days? Why does it put that as the amount? I don't think we've really used that or needed that in the past. But I also don't have a concern. I think if it was over 20 days, I would be concerned and wondering. That seems like quite a bit of time. I do think it's what I heard, only 5 to 6 days is really the need for it. Do any trustees think there would be a greater need?
No, I think taking a look at it, I mean, if you translate 20 days, I mean, that's like a month.
That's a month.
So that's
Yeah,
4
that's a lot.
weeks.
Yeah.
I don't see any of us being pulled away for a month of time,
Gosh,
given
no.
all the other things going on. So
Yeah.
I could be comfortable if we're just picking out a number, we can cut it in half and call it 10, and less than 10 is fine. That's 2 weeks. That gives us a little bit of play, but I would hate to say 5 days and be 1 week, and then all of a sudden that Saturday shows up, or there's a random day somewhere, and then it gets funky. But I can go.
I think
with the flow
10 is a
type
good
thing.
number if everybody feels comfortable with that.
Yeah, I think I'm open to that change. Okay. So where it says beyond the limit delineated in ed code, so you're saying that means not right, but beyond the limit not to exceed 5%.
Right, that you can't, you would not be allowed to increase the beyond the limit set in ed code. However, if you were below a limit, you can only increase it in 5% increments. And
Right.
in that, if you were looking to arrive at the ed code, if the board chooses to use the current ed code language with the evergreen kind of clauses in that, you could delete the second paragraph potentially. The ed code still operates whether or not you have it in this bylaw. So if you're looking at having,
It says that the cap.
yeah.
Right. Then I would be totally fine taking it
Yeah,
out. So we
same.
don't have to have that included.
right, because
Okay.
the first sentence kind of does provide at that level. And so since we're at that maximum level, then there would not be a need to increase ever because you're already there.
Okay, so am I hearing the changes we would like to make would be to remove that sentence on the 5% and then to decrease the 20 to 10? And would that,
Call it a day.
would those be the changes requested?
I'd be happy to make a motion for those changes.
Okay, there's a motion to make those changes. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Do we need a roll call vote or just approval? Yeah.
Just clarifying, is it those changes and then the policy stands as is we're voting, or are we taking 2
I
separate
think
votes?
it's just change, and then we'll take a separate vote for the policy. Is that,
You can actually, in the
Do it
same
all at
motion, make
once.
it all in one, that in the motion, if I
So do
can
we need to
repack the
add
motion,
that,
I heard,
though?
the motion I heard was to move to adopt Board Bylaw 9250 with the removal of the second paragraph, and in the section that says up to 20 days annually would be changed to 10 days annually. And so the motion on the floor, Madam President, is for adoption.
okay, so we have a first and a second. Georgia, will you please call the roll?
Lucas Marquardt,
Yes.
Rochelle Price,
Yes.
Tiffany Sadoff,
Yes.
Michelle Sutherland,
Yes.
Derek Counter,
Yes.
Julie Hupp.
Yes, thank you. Motion passes. And we will now move on to item 10, 6.1, and we invite Hannah back up to the microphone to join us again to present Board Policy and Administrative Regulation Revised BPAR 0450 Comprehensive Safety Plan.
Good evening again. California Education Code requires every school site to maintain a comprehensive school safety plan that addresses emergency preparedness, campus safety procedures, and coordination with local law enforcement and emergency responders. School districts are required to adopt related board policies and administrative regulations that guide the development, review, and implementation of these plans. District staff reviewed Board Policy and Administrative Regulation 0450, Comprehensive Safety Plan, and made updates to ensure alignment to legal current requirements. The revisions clarify procedures related to the development, annual review, and coordination of school safety plans with local law enforcement and emergency responders. Tonight, BPAR 0450 are before trustees as information item and will be brought back for action at a following board meeting. I am happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, trustees, do you have questions?
So I think, and I know the answer, but I just want to validate this. So every year, we have those 26, 28-page documents that goes through by school, all this detail. So this is a policy that tells us that we should do what we already are doing.
Correct. Our safety plans are currently in alignment with this education code. This is the policy that updates to make sure now our plans are in alignment with this policy and the education code.
How do we plan to roll these out to our school site councils, this policy?
Thank you for asking that. Annually, Education Services provides directions to each principal or assistant principal in charge of safety plans. We have kept those directions up to date with the law that is in this policy. So all of our plans have been revised annually to be updated to this policy. To the law, I'm sorry. And so annually that would continue, that directions are provided to school sites. Those directions reflect any updates in the law, and then school sites school sites make sure to update their safety plans. School site councils approve those safety plans, and then they are brought here to trustees for approval each April. For approval.
Thank you. I don't have any other questions. I'm just appreciative that we're doing this and grateful that it's, 2026. It's a good time to do this.
Yeah, I would say, just going back, thank you. I know last couple of years we had a lot of variation. I know you did some diligent work getting those things all aligned, working on a similar pattern. I know the data is all collected and run through, so it's silly that we have to come back and update a policy to something that we're already doing, but hey, it's the state of California, so.
But it is encouraging that we are already doing these things and have, been very on top of these responses that are so important.
Hannah, thank you for all your hard work. No, go ahead.
Just one thought on it that I noticed that caught my eye. On the Regulation 0450 Comprehensive Safety Plan, on the first page towards the top, it talks about, which I think is great, the school site council shall consult with the local law enforcement, local fire department. The second paragraph then says, additionally, school site council may invite community leaders, local emergency medical services personnel, the district's public entity risk pool joint powers authority, lists lots of different groups. Who approves that, and what's the process for that?
Great. Our education services team keeps a list of different representatives from local religious organizations, local civic leaders, local business organizations, that we update annually with just new names and contact details. Some of those that are included in that paragraph are not on our list, but the ones that are included on page 2 in that section, that is also a May section, but we do believe that it's important for our broader community to understand what is in our safety plans and be part of those, that planning process. And so those are, the contact information is updated annually. The list, as we brought this policy forward, the list is also undergoing some updates, and we can make sure that trustees are aware of all of the members that are included in that list.
Great. I'd love a copy of that list if it can be sent to us in ABC or something, specifically for groups that are approved or recommended to come before our school site councils. regarding their safety plans.
Absolutely, and just for a little bit of context, we have, in my 7 years of doing this and previous 6 years as a principal here, those lists were always sent out, and typically it is only, to my knowledge, our local members of law enforcement, our police and fire departments who come to those meetings. So I think it's wonderful that we include everyone, and everyone knows when these meetings are happening at our school sites, and that they can participate if they so choose. Just for trustees' information, we only ever have had, to my knowledge, police and fire representatives, and we are so thankful when they come. They're value added to the conversations that happen at school site councils, so we encourage them to be there.
Since
Great,
it's
thank you
March,
for that clarification.
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Since we're at March 18th, will they be invited this year or would it be next year?
The current list were invited to the meetings that took place in January and February.
Okay.
And then the revised list would be included in next year's meetings, January and February. And those safety plans would be for the following year.
Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Any other questions or comments?
Questions, just on the second document, with the strike through about like number 10, hate crime reporting procedures and development of a positive school climate that promotes respect for diversity, personal and social responsibility, effective interpersonal and communication skills, self-esteem, anger management and conflict resolution, and these, kind of bullying, preventing, hazing, cyberbullying, behavior expectations and consequences for violations. Is this all struck through? Does this exist elsewhere? Is this already kind of part of their plans? Just kind of wondering about that.
Thank you. So number 10, hate crime reporting procedures, is just a reflection of the revised language that comes above it.
Okay,
And so there is some revised language around. Specifically, you can look at number 5, harassment, intimidation, and bullying are there up top. And there's some other spaces, I'm gonna look for them, but that specifically speak to that hate crime reporting procedures. So those are all in that top portion, which is shall language. That's in Ed Code that we have to include those in the plan. Everything that is below and is struck through is in Ed Code as may language. We can include these pieces. Some of what you see there around that positive school environment, our safety plans actually include 2 components, actually 3. One is the data that was talked about, and that is also driven by what is in Ed Code here. The other is goals related to just what that first one is talking about, developing a positive school climate. There's goals and conversations that take place on our campuses annually related to that positive school climate. The third piece that's in our safety plans is how we respond to everything that's in that top shall language. So I can assure you that our safety plans do include that, but it is not the recommendation to include that here in the administrative regulation because it is not required by education code that it is included.
Okay, just to make sure, so like I know there's one that talks about like prevention and intervention strategies related to the sale or use of drugs and alcohol, which shall reflect expectations for drug-free schools. I do recall just from some prior conversations about suspensions and those kind of things that those do, oftentimes relate to some kind of drugs or inappropriate substances on campus. So just knowing that that's an ongoing area that we're looking at, I just would want to make sure that if we're striking through some of these things, just knowing that it's under the umbrella, just not sure if we do need to think about explicitly mentioning them just because it is something that we encounter.
Trustees could absolutely add back in anything that's in that may language. When looking and reviewing the CSBA recommendation for language for our policy, there were a number of options that we could include in that may section. Revised language that's not required by Ed Code, but that the Ed Code says districts may include. And so we could share that with trustees, that updated language, so that could be part of the conversation when this is you could look at that and then
That would be great.
bring that back to have a conversation when this comes back the next time. And that way you could decide, we don't want to include all of that language. We want to include the things that are really relevant to our local data and that we have talked about, related to these pieces. So that's an option before you.
I think if we could review those prior to next time, that would be helpful, at least to me.
When you say reviewing, sorry, just so I understand, you're meaning the strike-through parts you want us to review, if there's any of those you want us to bring back? What do you mean by review? Just trying to get clarification.
Absolutely. I'm happy to clarify what I think I heard and then correct me if I'm wrong. So what I believe I heard is there's some interest in reviewing some of that language that is struck through that is related to things we have an option to do as a school district. When reviewing the CSBA language, there are a lot of edits to this section. The CSBA recommended language did not cross out this entire section. Staff crossed out this entire section because it is not required by education code, and we've heard direction to only include things in policies that are required in education code. So these items are not required, but we could share with trustees in a communication that CSBA recommended language for trustees to review, and then when we bring this back, that could be a conversation of what of that language might you choose to include in the administrative regulation.
So you'd bring it back as is, what we're looking at tonight, but you would just send us communication of CSBA thoughts and recommendations, and then we can just individually review them, and then if we want, we can bring that up as an item at the next meeting. Staff would not be making a recommendation on that. It's just more information for us to have to review if that's something we want to individually bring up.
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
I think, just so from a reference standpoint, we've done some great work standardizing it. And again, I have no problem. The only thing I would be wary of is I don't want some schools to have some things and some schools not to have things. So it is a nice, thank you. It's a nice packet that we have that is very consistent across the schools. So my feedback would be I'd be really wary to have this part added here and not there. And so if we're going to let's be consistent all the way through. So.
And I also think I think it's a healthy standard to say, hey, we really as trustees want to see, and I do think we've given that direction, recommendations be clear what is recommended from the state and what is required. And so I do want to make that clear. I don't feel that has changed for me. I still appreciate, board policy to me is very different than adopted practice or even administrative regulations. And so I do think it's really critical that our board policy is very clear that it's reflective of state requirements. Now, if we want to add something, sometimes, of course, we have local control, we can do that. I just want to make clear, I still believe it's good conversation to have, but I would still like to see when recommendations of future topics come to us for policy that it is either delineated out, this is what is required and this is what is recommended, or like this, here is what is required to meet the ed code that has been amended.
And trustees, if I might, just to respond to Trustee Counter, in the administrative regulation, you might select some language to put back in, and that could be standardized by grade band. So you could say all 712 schools need to include this, or all of our elementary schools need to include that. So that way we don't get back to a place where it's in maybe 3 schools here and 1 school here. You could still standardize what it is across schools and have that be part of this administrative regulation.
Okay. Thank you, Hannah. And now I am very excited to have Elizabeth Davidson, Director of Academic Improvement in MTSS, present new board policy BP 5141.5, mental health. Welcome.
Good evening, President Hupp, Board of Trustees, Superintendent Stock. A little change of scenery for you on a board policy. We'll give Ms. Anderson a break. I am here to introduce a draft of Board Policy 5141.5 related to mental health. This policy is required as a result of Senate Bill 153, which established new mandates under Education Code Section 49428.2. This policy was drafted from the CSBA model policy and focuses on the language specifically required by California Education Code. Under this law, districts serving students in grades 7 through 12 must adopt a formal policy outlining referral protocols for student behavioral health concerns. Specifically, the policy includes referral protocols to connect students with behavioral health professionals and supports, support for at-risk or high-risk student groups, and staff training requirements, which include recognizing warning signs, indicators of substance abuse disorders, and understanding how to make referrals. So we are bringing this draft policy forward tonight for your discussion.
Thank you. And I really appreciate the bringing forward policies as info items so we can try to understand them and ask questions, and then also just mention things that might catch our eye or that we hear from community members. And I think it gives the community more time to be able to review something before we actually finalize it. So I appreciate you bringing this forward today. A couple things did catch my eye. One, on the district website, if we could just double check. I was just pulling up on the website, and I don't see this one attached on it. So can we just triple make sure it's on before the next one? I mean, there's 351 pages, so it could be maybe muddled in there somewhere, but I was looking through. So just making sure, so that way, because I know different people access different ways. But a couple things that caught my eye when I first read through that proposed policy is the section about youth behavior training done for staff. I just was hoping I could get a little more information, whether it be tonight or future days before it comes before a vote, on how this would actually be operationalized. What training is it, and who is approving this training, and can a trustee sit in on it, or can a copy be given to the trustee? Could you maybe speak to that a little bit?
Absolutely. I'm happy to provide some information now, and we can certainly follow up with additional information as needed. So we are required to provide evidence of training by 2029. So the law does give us some time and flexibility about how that training is delivered. So the requirements for training in terms of who's providing the training or what that looks like can be a combination of district-developed professional learning, so locally decided upon in partnership with County Office of Education supports, and community-based organizations can all be working collaboratively to develop the training. The required areas of focus within the training itself include recognizing early warning signs of mental health conditions, identifying indicators of substance use disorders, including opioid and alcohol misuse, and understanding how to respond appropriately and make referrals within the district's protocols.
Is this something we're creating then, or is this something that we're utilizing a curriculum for the training?
We will likely create this locally in partnership with our County Office of Education and some of our community partners.
Okay, great. I'd love to just be informed as we refine that and roll that out to staff, just so that way trustees are aware. Also, I believe that training, but then also in the document it refers to referrals that would be made. Who approves referrals that are made to students for outside organizations?
Great question. So our school counselors primarily function in this capacity, and they work closely with our families who are requesting additional support to work through their insurance provider when possible. Additionally, counselors have the opportunity to collaborate with Placer County Office of Education's Prevention Supports and Services team, who connect families with community-based services for Medi-Cal eligible families. So if a family approaches one of our counselors or staff members, they would be providing that same, those same community-based resources as they would if we did a referral to Placer County.
Okay, I guess what I'm looking for, is there any way a parent would know who's on that referral list? Is it a list that we say, hey, these are approved by Rocklin Unified? I know we used to have on our websites a page of resources or referrals of third-party organizations for students. Do we still have that? And then is there a list for this referrals, or how are those referrals vetted?
So we do have resources and community-based services on our district website. Those are that mirror what Placer County Office of Education utilizes in terms of referrals for community-based services. If a family were to ask us, we typically engage with the family to understand what the scope is that they're looking for in terms of support, and we would provide those same resources that the county is offering. We don't use like a published list that we post somewhere.
Okay.
But the resources that our counselors or school staff would be providing are consistent site by site based on what Placer County Office of Ed has provided to us.
Okay. Would that be something we could get a copy of?
Absolutely.
Perfect. I'd love
to
that.
provide that.
And sorry, these three kind of go hand in hand. I don't mean to monopolize the conversation. The other one I just had kind of goes along with that of there was a section in the policy that I just want to understand a little bit more. And it kind of talked about counseling that happens on campus and who is qualified to provide these services. It mentions social workers, it mentions counselors, mentions a few different classifications, but essentially those that have the credentials to do so. Could I just get, and I don't know if other trustees are interested, but what those credentials are? We just say like those that have the credentials. Can you share with me what those credentials are? It can be in the future, just sometime before the next meeting. And then also how that is operationally happening as well. I understand we've had, the conversation about some conversations have sensitivity, some conversations require an immediate parent notification. How is this actually play out? Is a parent notified if a student leaves class during class time? Maybe not notified of what happens, but where they're going if they're leaving class? Could you give me a little more information on that?
Sure, I'd be happy to provide that in a board communication just so I can make sure that it's complete in terms of the answer. In general, the credentials we're looking at are for our school counselors who typically have a PPS credential. Okay. Our school psychologist and their work is typically around special education services, so they do a lot of assessment and evaluation and will be providing services directly related to a student's individualized education plan, which could include counseling services as a part of their IEP. We do not currently have social workers, so we do have mental health specialists. I believe our two have our LMFTs. So they can provide more of a therapeutic environment, whereas our school counselors are providing school-based counseling services.
Great, that's helpful. Okay. Really what I'm looking for in the follow-up communication is really how parents can know what types of referrals might be made to their student and when a student is either utilizing some of these services or just not in a classroom environment during class time. Thank you.
So in the, I guess it's mental health and counseling and referrals section, I guess the second page, it's 1A. So it talks about, as appropriate referral protocol specified, the needs of high-risk groups. Who determines high risk? How is that determined? And like, how do you operationalize that? Who labels? Do we comment or do we include parents on the labels? And then if there is a child that goes through the process, is there a way to unlabel or are you forever labeled?
Great question. So the specific groups are listed in education code as part of that policy. But in regard to your question about identification or label, the policy does not require staff to identify or label students as belonging to a specific high-risk group. Instead, it's focusing on recognizing student needs and observable indicators. So that may include changes in behavior, attendance, academic performance, or expressions of distress, and then connecting those students with appropriate supports.
I guess if that's the case, then why wasn't it stated that way?
In California education code?
Or in our policy.
So this is, the language that's in there is what's required by Ed Code 49428.2. It specifically calls out those student groups. Okay. But our practice will be not focused on identification or labeling, but on recognizing signs and symptoms of students in need of mental health
translating
support.
That is difficult, right? So we say we're going to do this, but then we print and we communicate a different way. It's confusing.
Well, it does say including but not limited to also.
fair. When you open up that, it just widens the box. Right, so if it's gonna be students that may need extra services or counseling or conversation, but when you identify groups, then it's like, well, what group are you gonna put them in?
Would that information be something that's part of a referral or documented in any way?
Typically not, unless the student or a parent or a family member self-disclosed that information because they thought it was relevant in terms of the types of supports and services that the family was seeking.
Okay.
Now, I know in a previous, and just asking the question, because in a previous policy, I find it engaging conversation, we didn't need to necessarily duplicate ed code in our policy because ed code still stood. Our policy just included that which we felt was necessary to highlight. Would that be the case in something like this, or does ed code require us to specifically put in our policy that entire paragraph?
So I will send a board communication after doing some research on that. I do know these student groups are specifically listed in the same manner in our suicide prevention policy, so we can certainly look into if it's listed there, if it needs to be duplicated here.
Perfect. And I see it in the ed code. I'm not saying I necessarily agree or disagree. I just do find it an interesting conversation that ed code would still stand, and so that policy would still be relevant. It just would be what is required to be put in this policy.
So trustees, just to be clear, so as we bring this back for your consideration, kind of consistent with the previous policy is we won't be making we've not been requested to make any actual wording text changes when we bring this back, but we'll provide you with information going forward. So say if it was allowable to not list the groups, but just refer possibly to high-risk groups per ed code, whatever, then that may be something you all could suggest here, but we'll be bringing this text back as is, and then obviously you can have the conversations and direct the staff as you'd like.
Could we have that information hopefully a little bit prior, though, so we can digest it and understand it before the board meeting?
Absolutely. We'll work to get this out in the next couple of weeks. Our next meeting's 4 weeks away, so that works.
One more thing that I was wondering if you could add. Speaking of credentials and some of these, really heavy subjects, how do our secondary peer counselors play into this? What is their role? I definitely don't, I'm not suggesting they're part of the policy, but I would like to know, as a matter of practice, how they fit into this.
I'll get you some additional information about that. We have, our peer counseling programs look a little bit different by site, but they are always under the direction of staff and not providing direct service to students.
And do we only have those at both high schools, or do the middle schools have them as well? Okay, just the high schools. Okay, yeah, I would love that. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I do not see any public comment. Is there anyone here who would like to fill out a green card or meant to fill out a green card? Okay. Then seeing no public comment, we will move to item 12, pending agenda items. And our board bylaws require 2 trustees to place an item on the agenda. Trustees, do you have any items to discuss for consideration on the pending agenda? Okay. In that case, the meeting is now adjourned.